The grand hall of the Velorian Ascendancy fell silent as Princess Seythara walked alone down the ceremonial aisle. No one moved. No one bowed. The crystalline chandeliers above cast prismatic light across hundreds of noble faces, each one turned deliberately away, a calculated insult that needed no translation. Seythara's silver-blue skin seemed to pale further with each step, her four-fingered hands clasped before her in the posture of formal dignity, though the slight tremor in her shoulders betrayed her composure. Ambassador Marcus Cole stood near the back of the hall, his human delegation relegated to the far corner reserved for lesser species. He had been warned about Velorian politics, the intricate dance of honor and shame that governed their society, but he hadn't expected to witness a public execution of dignity. "The scarred princess," whispered Lord Vethan to his companion, loud enough to carry. "Does she truly believe any house would bind themselves to damaged goods?" Marcus watched Seythara's stride falter for just a fraction of a second. The scar they spoke of ran from her temple to her jaw, a pale ridge against her luminescent skin. He had read the intelligence reports. The assassination attempt 3 years ago. The death of her mother in the same attack. The whispers that she had somehow brought shame upon her house by surviving when her betrothed had not defended her. Velorian logic, he thought bitterly. Blame the victim for the assassin's blade. The high matriarch of House Seythan, Seythara's grandmother, sat upon the raised dais, her expression carved from stone. This was the presentation of worth, Marcus had learned. An ancient ritual where a princess of marriageable age walked before the assembled houses, and suitors would kneel to declare their interest. Every noble turned away from the alien princess. Not one knee touched the ground. Seythara reached the center of the hall and stopped. Protocol demanded she wait until the ceremonial bell chimed thrice. She would have to stand there, in the center of that vast emptiness, while every house made their rejection visible. The first bell rang, its tone pure and cruel. Marcus remembered another moment like this. A funeral on earth. His daughter's small casket. Friends who had promised to stand with him, absent when it mattered. The hollow ache of being alone in a room full of people who should have cared. The second bell rang. Before he understood what he was doing, Marcus was moving. His footsteps echoed across the polished floor. He heard the sharp intake of breath from his own delegation, Ambassador Chen hissing his name in warning. He ignored her. The Velorian nobles finally turned their faces forward, but only to stare at the spectacle of a human crossing the sacred distance reserved for suitors. Whispers erupted like a disturbed hive. What is he doing? A human? In the presentation circle? This is an outrage. Marcus stopped 3 paces before Princess Seythara. Her violet eyes met his, wide with something he couldn't name. Confusion. Fear. A desperate, fractured hope she was trying to crush before it could hurt her. He had no idea what the proper words were. He barely knew the ritual's name. But he knew how to recognize someone who had been abandoned, and he knew what it felt like to stand alone. Marcus Cole, ambassador of Earth's fledgling stellar republic, knelt before her. The third bell never finished its ring. It strangled into silence as the entire hall seemed to forget how to breathe. "I don't know your customs," Marcus said quietly. His voice meant only for her. "I don't know if I'm allowed to be here. But no one should have to stand alone like this. No one." Seythara stared down at him. A single tear traced the path of her scar before she blinked it away with a warrior's discipline. "You cannot know what you have done," she whispered. "I know enough," he replied. "I know that whatever they see when they look at you, they're wrong." Behind them, the high matriarch rose from her seat, the first time she had moved since the ritual began. Her voice rang out like a blade being drawn. "The human has knelt. By the ancient law, his declaration is witnessed. The presentation is complete." The silence that followed was louder than any sound Marcus had ever heard. The diplomatic quarters assigned to the human delegation were modest by Velorian standards, which meant they were merely opulent rather than obscenely lavish. Marcus sat alone in his private chamber, turning a small holographic cube in his hands. Inside it, frozen in light, a young girl laughed silently at something beyond the frame's edge. A chime announced a visitor. "Enter," he said, slipping the cube into his pocket. He expected Ambassador Chen, ready to deliver the lecture he deserved about unilateral actions and diplomatic protocols. Instead, the door revealed a Velorian in formal robes of deep indigo, the colors of House Scythen. "I'm Lord Cathan," the man said, his tone carrying the careful neutrality of someone who had not yet decided whether Marcus was an enemy. "First Shield of House Seythara. I am here on behalf of Princess Seythara." Marcus stood. "How can I help you?" Cathan stepped inside, letting the door seal behind him. He was tall even for a Velorian, his silver-blue features sharp and assessing. A thin scar crossed his throat, an old wound, poorly healed. "You can explain," Cathan said, "why a human with no standing, no house, and no understanding of what he was doing would risk galactic incident for a woman he has never met. Does there need to be a reason? There always is. Especially with humans." Cathan's eyes narrowed. "Your species has been among the stars for less than 2 centuries. You have no homeworld alliance, no ancient treaties. You are merchants and wanderers. What possible gain could you seek from binding yourself to a princess even her own people have rejected?" Marcus felt the old anger stir, the same anger that had carried him across that hall. "I wasn't calculating advantages. I saw someone being humiliated for something that wasn't her fault. Where I come from, you don't just watch that happen. And where you come from, is it customary to kneel before foreign royalty without understanding that such an act is binding?" The word landed like a stone. "Binding," Marcus repeated carefully. "You have declared formal interest. Under Velorian law, you have entered the courtship trials. You cannot withdraw without bringing shame upon yourself and your entire delegation. The princess cannot refuse to participate without admitting that even a human's interest is above her worth." Cathan's expression was unreadable. "You have trapped you both." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he laughed, a short, humorless sound. "So what happens now? Now you will be tested. The princess's grandmother will design trials to determine your worthiness. They will be designed to break you, to prove that humans are insufficient, that you acted from ignorance rather than genuine intent." Cathan stepped closer. "Tell me the truth, Ambassador. When she rejects you at the end, because she will, because she must, will you accept it with grace? Or will you make this worse?" "I don't know what will happen at the end," Marcus said. "But I'm not going to let her stand alone again. Whatever these trials are, I'll face them." "Why?" The question was sharp, almost angry. Marcus recognized it, the frustration of someone who wanted a simple answer and wasn't getting one. "Because I know what it's like to be left behind," he said quietly. "My daughter died 4 years ago. Cancer d'artial. She was 7. And when she was in that hospital bed at the end, some of the people who should have been there just weren't. They couldn't handle it. They walked away." He met Cathan's gaze. "I will never be someone who walks away. Not ever again." Cathan studied him for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, not softening exactly, but a recognition of something he hadn't expected to find. "The first trial is tomorrow at dawn," he said finally. "The trial of witness. You will be asked to speak of what you have seen. Velorians do not lie in formal testimony. Can humans say the same? I've never been good at lying anyway." Cathan moved toward the door, then paused. "The princess asked me to deliver a message," she said. "Thank him for the kindness, and tell him I am sorry for what I have cost him." "Tell her," Marcus said, "that she hasn't cost me anything, and that she doesn't need to apologize for existing." The Velorian's expression flickered, surprise perhaps, or something close to it. Then he was gone. Marcus pulled the holographic cube from his pocket and looked at his daughter's frozen smile. "I hope I'm doing the right thing, sweetheart," he murmured. "But I think you would have liked her." The trial of witness took place in the Chamber of Truth, a vast circular room where every surface had been polished to mirrors. Marcus stood in the center, surrounded by his own reflections extending into infinity. The High Matriarch sat on a raised platform, flanked by the heads of the 7 major houses. Princess Seythara stood apart in the position reserved for the subject of courtship, close enough to hear every word, forbidden to speak. "Marcus Cole of Earth," the High Matriarch's voice echoed. "You have declared interest in Seythara of House Scythan. Before your worth can be measured, your truth must be known. What do you witness when you look upon the princess?" The question was a trap. He understood that now, after hours of hastily reviewing Velorian customs with Ambassador Chen. The nobles expected him to speak of beauty, of political advantage, of whatever shallow motivation they had assigned to his actions. Any answer he gave would be dissected for weakness. Marcus looked at Seythara. She stood perfectly still, her violet eyes fixed on some point beyond the mirrors, her expression carefully empty. The scar on her face caught the light. "I witnessed someone who was hurt," he said, "and blamed for it. I witnessed someone who has been taught that her survival is shameful. I witnessed courage that nobody in this room seems willing to recognize." Whispers rippled through the assembled nobles. The High Matriarch's expression didn't change. "You speak of her scar, of the attack that killed her mother and her betrothed. You find this courageous. She's still standing. After everything that was taken from her, and everything that's been taken since, her mother, her future, her dignity, she still walked down that hall alone. Where I come from, we call that brave." "And where you come from," Lord Vethane interjected, his tone dripping with disdain, "what do you call a woman who could not inspire her betrothed to die for her? Among our people, Prince Seveth's failure to protect her suggests she was not worth protecting." Marcus felt his hands curl into fists at his sides. He forced them to relax. "Where I come from," he said, keeping his voice level, "we don't blame victims for the failures of their protectors. And we don't measure someone's worth by whether other people were willing to die for them. We measure worth by who they are, by what they do when they're broken and nobody's watching." "Pretty words," Vethane sneered. "But words are easy for humans, are they not? You have never faced true loss. You have never—" "My daughter died," Marcus cut in. The words fell like stones into water. "She was 7 years old. She had her mother's eyes, and she loved to dance. And I watched her waste away for 2 years, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Don't tell me I haven't faced loss." The chamber went silent. Even Vethane had no response. Marcus turned back to the High Matriarch. "You want to know what I witness when I look at your granddaughter? I witness someone who survived the worst thing that can happen to a person, and instead of being supported, she was abandoned. I witness someone who has every reason to be bitter and broken, but chose to show up anyway. That's what I witness." The High Matriarch's silver eyes studied him for a long moment. Then she raised one hand, the signal for testimony to end. "The trial of witness is concluded. Marcus Cole has spoken truth as he knows it. Whether that truth holds worth in Velorian eyes remains to be determined." The nobles began to file out, their whispers a harsh susurrus in the mirrored space. Marcus remained where he was, watching Seythara. She hadn't moved, hadn't looked at him throughout his entire testimony. But as the chamber emptied, she finally turned her head. Their eyes met across the distance. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her expression held something he recognized from his own mirror in the months after the funeral. The terrible, fragile hope of someone who has forgotten how to expect kindness. Then Lord Cathan appeared at her side, murmuring something about protocol, and she allowed herself to be led away. That night, Marcus found a small object outside his door. Crystalline flower, carved from the same material as the chandeliers in the Grand Hall. Among Velorians, he would later learn, such tokens were given only to those who had seen truth without flinching. He kept it beside the holographic cube for the rest of his days. The final trial was called the Binding Question. It took place in the same Grand Hall where Marcus had first knelt, but this time the atmosphere was different. Word had spread through the Ascendancy about the human who spoke of truth and grief before the 7 houses. Some called him a fool. Others, fewer but growing, spoke of him with something approaching respect. Marcus stood before the High Matriarch once more. Seythara stood beside him now, close enough that he could see the slight tremor in her hands. 12 weeks of trials had passed. He had been tested on combat, and lost, badly, but refused to yield. He had been tested on Velorian history, and surprised them all by actually learning it. He had been tested on sacrifice, and given away 3 months of diplomatic rations to feed a refugee transport stranded at the edge of the system. Now came the end. "Marcus Cole," the High Matriarch said, her voice filling the hall, "you have endured the trials of our people. You have shown qualities we did not expect from humanity. But one question remains, and your answer will determine everything." She turned to face him fully, and for the first time, he saw something in her ancient eyes that might have been curiosity. "Do you understand what you are claiming? Seythara is not merely a princess. She is the last heir of a dying house. To bind yourself to her is to carry the weight of her burdens, her enemies, and her scars. You would be nothing among our people, a human consort, lower than any Velorian servant. Your children, if any came, would be marked forever as hybrid. Your own people might reject you for abandoning human interests." She let the words hang in the air. Knowing all of this, why would you choose her? Marcus had thought about this moment for weeks. He had practiced answers, refined them, discarded them. Now, standing in the silence of that vast hall, he let all of them go. He turned to Seythara. "I didn't choose you because of politics," he said quietly. "I didn't choose you because it would help Earth, or because I wanted power, or because I had anything to gain. I chose you because you were alone, and I knew what that felt like. Because you were strong when everyone expected you to be broken. Because when I look at you, I see someone worth standing beside." He reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. His hand found hers, her 4 fingers cool against his 5. "I'm not asking to save you. I know you don't need saving. I'm asking to stand with you, whatever comes, for as long as you'll let me." Seythara's violet eyes shimmered. For a moment, the mask of Velorian composure cracked, and he saw the woman beneath, exhausted, hopeful, terrified of believing. "You will lose everything," she whispered. "I already lost everything once. I survived. I can do it again." He squeezed her hand gently. "But I don't think I will. Not with you." The High Matriarch watched them both. Something shifted in her expression, the granite finally showing a fracture. "Seythara of House Seythan," she said formally, "do you accept this human's declaration? Do you bind yourself to him, knowing what he is and what he offers?" Seythara drew a breath. Her hand tightened around his. "I accept," she said, and her voice rang through the hall like a bell. "Not because I have no other choice. Not because I am desperate. I accept because he saw me, truly saw me, when no one else would look. I accept because he knelt when no one else would stand. I accept because for the first time since my mother died, I do not feel alone." She turned to face the assembled nobles, and there was steel in her voice now. "Every noble turned away from me in this very hall. You all remember. You chose to forget my mother's sacrifice, my house's honor, everything but the scar on my face. But this human, This stranger from a species you mock and dismiss, he saw what none of you could. That is worth more than bloodlines. That is worth more than tradition. The silence that followed was different from before. Not the silence of shock, but the silence of those who had been witnessed themselves and found wanting. The High Matriarch rose. Then let it be recorded, she declared, that Seythara of House Seythara has chosen her consort. Let it be known that Marcus Cole of Earth stands with House Seythara, and let any who challenge this binding face not one, but both. She struck her staff against the floor 3 times, and the sound echoed like a heartbeat. Later, as the crowds dispersed and the politicians began their calculations anew, Marcus and Seythara stood together on a balcony overlooking the city. 3 moons hung in the violet sky, casting layered shadows across the crystalline spires. You know this will be difficult, Seythara said. She hadn't released his hand since the ceremony. My people will not easily accept you. Your people may never understand why you stayed. I know. There will be enemies. Plots. The houses that hate my grandmother will hate us more. I know that, too. She turned to look at him, and for the first time, he saw her smile. Small, hesitant, but real. Then why do you not seem afraid? Marcus thought of his daughter, of the holographic cube in his pocket and the crystal flower beside his bed, and all the long years of learning how to carry grief without letting it crush him. Because I spent 4 years being afraid, he said. Afraid of losing more than I already had. Afraid that caring about anything again would just mean more pain. He lifted her hand and pressed it gently against his chest, where his heart beat steady and certain. I'm tired of being afraid. I'd rather take the risk. Seythara was silent for a moment. Then she stepped closer, resting her forehead against his shoulder in the Velorian gesture of trust, the first time she had initiated contact between them. Then we will be unafraid together, she whispered. Above them, the 3 moons traced their ancient paths, indifferent to the small miracle happening below. But Marcus knew that miracles weren't about cosmic significance. They were about moments like this, 2 broken people choosing to be whole together, despite everything and everyone who said they couldn't. He wrapped his arm around her and watched the unfamiliar stars, and for the first time in 4 years, the future didn't feel like something to be endured. It felt like something to be welcomed.